Welcome to the Think Unbroken podcast. My name is Michael Anthony, and I'm your host. I'm a childhood trauma survivor and mentor. Think Unbroken is about understanding and overcoming childhood trauma through mindset and practical habits. This podcast is not meant to be a replacement for mental health care. Consider it more of a hangout. This podcast is sponsored by thinkunbroken.com. Follow me on social media at Michael Unbroken. Though trauma may be our foundation, it is not our future. Let's get into the show. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Think Unbroken podcast. As usual, I am Michael Anthony, coming to you live from my bedroom in Bali. It's been a crazy month. June, I should say, was a crazy month now that we are into July. June was this really intense month for me with health issues, bouncing back and forth between here and Bangkok, injuring my knee, partially tearing my MCL, got E. coli, had a headache a lot, really intense month. And also for most of the month, I didn't sleep more than like 2 or 3 hours a night, which is not outside my norm because I definitely have insomnia, but more so it was impacting my health in a really negative way. And the more research and the more studies and information that comes out about our health, we find that science should say, I'm not a scientist, I haven't found shit, but science has found that sleep is one of the most important things that we need. And I've never really slept, and I am on a mission right now. My number one goal in 2019 for the second half of the year is to sleep at least 9 hours a night. And that might sound intense. And to me, it does sound intense because I've functioned off of anywhere between 4 to 6 hours of sleep for the majority of my life. I mean, literally since I was a child. So now trying to figure out how to sleep is going to be a challenge. And if anyone has any advice or tips, I'm all ears. In the meantime, though, it's not what I want to talk about today. It is July 4th. It is 4th of July week in America, the United States, my home, where I'm from. Maybe not my home. I don't feel like the United States is particularly my home, especially now with traveling, seeing the world, not living there for almost a year. It's where I'm from, though. I grew up in Indianapolis, which is in Indiana, home of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the Colts, Pacers, more conventions than you know what to do with. I think one of the very first Comic Cons ever was there. And Indy is set dead in the middle of America. A lot of people call it a flyover state. I would not disagree with that. But I remember all of my 4th of Julys there as a child. And some were really fun and some definitely not. You know, the 4th of July has always been my favorite holiday outside of New Year's because there's something about the fireworks and the food, and it seems to be a day of celebration. And I realized, like, being here and not celebrating that and not being around a single other American, I only know like 2 Americans in Bali. Like, no one gives a shit. And I'm okay with that. I don't particularly care that it's the 4th of July, and especially with the really dark, disturbing shit that's happening in America right now. Now, you guys know this is not a political podcast, but I would be remiss not to talk about how I feel about the impact of all of these children who are in cages in America right now. And knowing that this actually isn't the first time that America has done this. And seeing the response of people there in the States who don't really seem to care or give a shit about something else is disturbing to me. Knowing that there are thousands and thousands of children in what they're calling detainment centers, locked in literal cages, separated from their parents, is one of the most insane fucking things imaginable. Think about this for a moment. We, Americans, I was not a part of this, I wasn't alive yet, nor was I even a concept. We fought a war to end a genocide that started with encampments, right? There's this guy Hitler, you might have heard of him. We have battled people again and again and again about equal rights and liberty, setting foot in everywhere from Africa to around the globe and back again. in this mission to make the world a better place as Americans. And yet, our home soil, we are right now engaging in one of the greatest atrocities, I think, of our lifetime. And people just are not stepping up in the way that they should. I think that as it's 4th of July and as it's a day of independence and as we celebrate this great concept of America, we have to remember it's not really that great right now. I've had a lot of people ask me why I left America to begin with. And it's not about politics, because at the end of the day, I don't particularly care about politics. They don't interest me. I needed to go on a journey of seeking a better understanding of myself in the world. And now that I'm away from it, I miss it less and less and less. Between the racial indiscrepancies, being profiled myself multiple times, seeing how dangerous it is. I could walk down the street in any country that I've been in Asia or anywhere else in the world in the middle of the night and never feel a sense of danger. And I couldn't do that in my own neighborhood growing up in Indianapolis. I couldn't do that in New York, couldn't do that in Portland, couldn't do that in LA. Nowhere I've ever been in America have I ever felt a sense of safety and security like I do now. And with what's happening with these children, it just really has triggered me. And I'm having a hard time processing it, because I see there are a collective of people, some of my friends included, who are making efforts to make sense of this, to talk about this, to bring this thing to light. We have amazing politicians who are out there like protesting this shit. And at the end of the day, I can't help but wonder, like, is this going to change? Is this actually affecting anything? Is this thing that is happening in America right now, do we even have an option? You know, we talk about politics in America a lot as this thing of unity and about making the world a better place and about making our home a better place. And you see something like this, and I cannot help but be ashamed. And it's triggered some really intense memories of my own childhood, of my stepfather locking me in closets or smashing my head against a wall. And it's brought up these memories of this feeling of being trapped, of knowing that, like, my little brothers being arrested for fighting each other when they were children, and my mom getting rid of us, and just all this chaos and this separation anxiety, which is one of the hardest kinds of anxiety that I deal with, this thought of just being alone and terrified. I put it like this: have you ever been like at a giant mall or shopping center and you lose your parents? And 20 years ago, if you lost your parents, you didn't have a cell phone to text them. You have to go to the information desk, and they have to page the whole place and go, you know, Mrs. Whoever, please come get your son Billy. You know, he's in the lingerie section at Kohl's. And true story, not me, but someone I know. And I think about that and that feeling of being lost, and I cannot fathom. I literally think about this for a moment. I cannot fathom how terrified those children must be right now. For me, I knew that even if I got lost in the mall, if I got lost in a store, wherever, there was someone that was going to be there to help me. And that's not the case for these children. And my heart breaks over it. And so as I think about the 4th of July and I think about what it is that America's supposed to be, again, I can't help, and I'm not going to harp on it for too long, but there's something to be said about the lack of care that's happening in that country right now. And people are out celebrating, they're having their barbecues, they're drinking their beers, and just like everything I've always experienced in America, until it hits home, it's like people don't give a fuck. And, you know, I feel lost in this because I'm not there, right? And people are going to go, oh, but you're not there. You're not doing shit. I realize this, and I don't want to be there right now. That is my choice because I'm moving towards something for myself that's really important right now. But that doesn't mean that I'm not impacted by it. It doesn't mean I'm not affected by it. It doesn't mean that I don't want to do something about it. So as I celebrate 4th of July from my room here in Bali, I can't help but really feel heartache about the situation for those people who are locked in these cages right now. It's so archaic. It's so disgusting. I don't know how, like, we have not violated every treaty and code and conventional thought of practicing humanity that exists. So I said what I have to say about that. July 4th is a really interesting holiday to me because when I was young, I loved it. I loved it. I loved the idea of the feeling of it. There is a certain energy, there's a certain air, a feeling in the air, an electricity, if you will, about the 4th of July. I remember, this story is so fucking funny. I was at my uncle's house, and we were on the west side of Indianapolis, and my aunt, my uncle, they always do these big barbecues with their kids, and all the family would come over, and, you know, there'd be 15 or 20 of us, and it would turn into a block party because they were in a cul-de-sac, and, you know, they'd block the cars at the end of the street so no cars could come up and down in the evening as we lit off fireworks to celebrate. One year, my grandma was probably like 10 years old, I bet. My grandmother was sitting in one of those little plastic chairs, chain smoking Misty Slims, and just pounding vodka. Not much different than her normal kind of Wednesday afternoon, right? And my uncle got those giant mortar shells, like those tubes that are a meter long that you drop the shell in, you light it, the fuse is another meter long, and then you sprint away because that thing's going to shoot up in the air, go 200, 300, 400 feet up and explode. Well, this particular 4th of July, my uncle put that shell in upside down. And it says distinctly on the package how to put the shell in so that this thing doesn't happen. And so he puts it in upside down, he lights it, and all of a sudden you hear the fuse go shoo, and it goes silent, and then out of nowhere, the shell explodes in the middle of the street, about 7 feet away from my grandmother. And she is sitting there smoking. And this is what's so crazy. My uncle was like, everybody run, get away. I put this thing in upside down. It's going to explode. And we all jet. Get the fuck out of there. And my grandma just sits there smoking this fucking cigarette as this shell explodes in the middle of the street, covering her in sparks and flames and colors, and she was illuminated like the night sky. And to this day, it's one of the funniest things I will ever remember, ever. One of the things about the 4th of July that happens to me also is that I get really bummed out. I get really sad. It's a day of depression for me, like a lot of holidays. This year feels a bit different, though, since I'm not in the States, but it's kind of there a little bit, I think. And the depression isn't this depression like I don't want to get out of bed or I'm super bummed out or whatever that might be. It's just kind of sitting there, this sense of agony or longing. And I always felt as a kid when family holidays particularly came around, especially anxious, because we would go and we'd put on these fronts. As a family, we would pretend that we're buttoned up and everything's good. And I just always knew that was a lie. I knew that wasn't true. I knew that at home there was violence, there was chaos, there was a mental, emotional, physical abuse. There was all of these things happening that when we stepped outside in the real world, most people didn't know. The bruises on our arms and our backs, those were accidents or playing sports. The way that we were shut off and disassociated from the world, that was just who we are. You know, my little brothers were on medication at very young ages. My mother tried to do the same for me, but I would often just flush it down the toilet. And I always felt disconnected when I saw families having real family moments, whether it's Thanksgiving, Christmas, the 4th, whatever. And my behavior as I got older tended to change around those holidays because I started doing the same thing that I saw everyone else doing, the older people, I should say. And these holidays became excuses for me to get trashed. On the 4th of July when I was 13 years old, my best friend and we got stoned out of our mind. We went to this little fireworks bodega that was in front of a grocery store about a mile away from our house. And we just stole hundreds and hundreds of packs of bottle rockets, right? I mean, this is 15 years ago. There's not a lot. Oh, hell, it was almost 20 years ago. There's not a lot that anyone could do to stop us. We just ran up in there with backpacks. We stuff our backpacks full of bottle rockets. And by the time the guy who was running the stand realized what happened, we were already back on our bikes sprinting down the street. And that afternoon we got back and we got this copper tubing and we had a bottle rocket war. Like basically you just put bottle rockets in these copper tubes, light them and shoot them at each other and hope that you don't like lose an eye or blow your fingers off in the process. Our clothes were full of holes. It was a mess. I had all these little burns on me from them exploding. You know, my brothers were a part of it. The neighborhood kids were a part of it. And that was just kind of how that went. And that night we went to, there's this area by the racetrack called the Coke Field, or Coke Lot, I guess is what it's called. And we just got really drunk. I was drinking Dark Eyes vodka, which is like bottom shelf bullshit vodka that is $1 a liter, probably, if that, and just stole it from my grandmother. Went there, he and I got trashed, obliterated, and came back home. My grandmother was like, "Are you drunk right now?" And I was like, "No, I'm not drunk." But I was seeing double, the room was spinning. I'm sure I smelled like vodka, because if a 13-year-old boy smells like rubbing alcohol, he was probably drinking shitty vodka. And so, you know, that was kind of my MO for 4th of July, especially for years and years. And later in my 20s, 4th of July became an awesome party day where I would just go get trashed all day long from morning till night with my friends. And one year I got really uncontrollably drunk. And it's one of the few times in my adult life that I still am ashamed of what happened. My little brother and I got into an argument, and it was, I don't know, midnight. Like everything's said and done, but I was so drunk that I got in this huge fight with him about nothing. Literally right now, if you ask me what did I get in a fight with my brother about, I would tell you I have no fucking idea. But he knows how to push my buttons, right? That's any brother, any sister, you kind of know how to push each other's buttons a little bit. And he was pushing mine, and in the middle of the street, I just started like attacking him. And my girlfriend's screaming, "Stop it." I'd never actually seen her like scared of me. And she's screaming, "Stop it. Stop it. What are you doing? You guys are brothers. Stop fighting. Stop fighting." And we might have punched each other like once or twice. And I got in my car and I left. And I was really, really drunk. And there's absolutely zero reason I should have been in a car driving that night. And luckily, I only lived around the corner. So I got back home in like 3 minutes, and I just sat in my car so fumingly mad I started punching the dashboard. I just didn't know how to process or understand the emotions and the anger that I had. And I sat there and all these memories started sparking of my childhood, of these events, of these holidays together. And just realizing like no one really understood what it was like to be me, because my brother wasn't me, my girlfriend wasn't me, no one was me, and no one could really grasp why I was always upset. Like I had this anger streak in me for years that just made me want to destroy everything in my path. And I did a fucking great job at it too. I'm the king of destroying everything in my path. Relationships, friendships, opportunities, myself, obviously. And that night as I sat there in the car and reminisced and had these flashback moments of childhood hit me again, I became really upset with myself. And I just sat there wondering, what the fuck am I really doing? Why did I lash out at my brother? Why did my girlfriend later that night tell me that she was scared of me? Something that I never imagined she would say. I would never hit my girlfriend. I would never put a hand on her. And she was like, "I was actually scared that you were going to hit me." And that made my heart sink. And I couldn't help but think, like, what the fuck am I really doing? And I apologized to my brother the next day, you know, in a bullshit half-assed way. We're like, "Dude, I'm sorry that I got drunk. I blame the alcohol," like everything, because at that point in my life, nothing was my fault. You can probably relate to that if you have any semblance of a background like mine. And so instead of fully owning it and fessing